We don't understand really that emotion that countries experience when they are ready or when they can start the access, the process to join the EU. Marta Kos, thank you for taking time here in the studio in the Berlaymont building, Commissioner for Enlargement. We were looking at your title and we were thinking it suggests that enlargement is a goal itself. Do you think the day will arrive that your position is superfluous, that your work is done, that people will say, thank you for your service, we don't need a Commissioner for Enlargement anymore?
I hope not during my term, but if we will be successful in the enlargement process in the future, then at some point we will not enlarge anymore, and then this position will be obsolete for sure.
Yeah, but what's your idea about how long this will take? Are we talking about decades, that the EU will still enlarge and enlarge?
I don't believe so. So in the present group we have 10 candidates, and some of them are candidates only on the paper. With one of them, like Turkey, we haven't done anything since 2018, so there is a big difference. Kosovo doesn't have a status yet, so we have a clear group of front runners. And perhaps at the end of August, we will get another candidate if the citizens of Iceland will decide to come back. So then this group will be a bit bigger, but I don't expect that in the future the group will grow and grow and grow.
Okay. Did you set yourself a goal, like at the end of your term you want the EU to enlarge with 2 members, 3 members? How does that work for you? Because this is your job.
Now, you want me to speak as Marta or as a commissioner? No, clearly I have goals, and I think that it is realistic that we could have 2 to 3 new members until 2030 if the countries will deliver. This is always if the countries will deliver. But we are living now in this crazy geopolitical times where so many things have changed. Luckily, enlargement is priority again, and we can benefit from this development. On the other hand, enlargement is much more than just enlargement today. It is also connected to how Europe will respond to these geopolitical challenges, and of course how Europe can get stronger, meaning we will only be able to get stronger if we do it right. And it makes sense that we get stronger. Otherwise, it would make no, why would we enlarge? But being stronger today for me is also resist to the pressure which is coming not just from the East, but also from the West, meaning from the MAGA ideologies who would like to persuade us that Europe is in decline.
Yeah, now we will discuss the concept of enlargement a little bit later more. But we wanted to start with the latest news as well. We have now many countries seeking to join the EU. And according to our colleagues at Politico, that acceleration comes at a price. So staff is now using an internal AI tool to take care of, for instance, the EU's acquis communautaire. How does this AI tool look like? How does it work?
Oh, this is for the screening process.
Yes.
For the screening process where, before we start negotiating, we have to have a picture what kind of legislation is in the candidate country and what needs to be done further on. So this is just in this phase. Later on, when we go chapter by chapter negotiations, it is human-based. So this is the big difference. But, there are more than 100,000 pages of the European acquis. So, of course, it is possible. We did it in the past with the humans, but today the AI is helping. But this is only really this screening phase only.
So you put all the acquis into a LLM, a language model, and then you say, look at the legislation in the countries.
Yes.
And okay.
And this was developed in my services in DG NST.
And was it an American?
This
chatbot?
I don't know.
You don't know that? Okay.
I will ask. Thank you for reminding me.
I hope it will be European. But
but the question is, are you lacking staff? Are there too many candidates? Or is the acquis too big?
Okay, many different questions. But indeed now, around 1,000 people in Brussels, in the Commission, are working for one candidate country horizontally. So it is not just my services, it is all the other services when it is about the agriculture, DG Agri and so on. But indeed, if we will now speed up because the candidates are more delivering, we will have to regroup, as I say it, or being more effective. There is no other way. We will not get more people for this. The process is demanding, but it is doable. We have had people for enlargement also in the years when we didn't enlarge. Some of them, they are telling me, are now happy. Finally, now we can work on the project. We have been hired, and I like this.
We are recording this conversation in the week that you had Mega Monday. That's how you call it, right?
It was mega, being there, it can be very technical, those intergovernment conferences, but this time, as never before, it was very emotional, and I have never seen people crying.
Really?
When we have, yes, and I get goosebumps now when I'm talking about this. When we have open cluster 1 for Ukraine, people in the hall were crying. And also we have been, a very emotional moment has been when the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, Anita Orban, was saying, we are supporting Ukraine. We haven't had this. We have been blocked for more than a year. So it was a special, very, very special moment. And it was Cluster 1 Moldova, Ukraine, and 2 chapters closed. So 3 IGCs. If we do it well until July, we could have a Super Tuesday on 14th of July with even more IGCs. So
wow. Yeah, we're from the Netherlands. We're one of the founding fathers of the EU. I guess that we don't feel that emotion, or we don't understand really that emotion that countries experience when they are ready or when they can start the access, the process to join the EU. That's something that we don't experience that much, I think, Stefan.
Or take it for granted. We've been there all the time.
Perhaps we should stick together more. I can also speak from my experiences when my country was in the waiting room. So, having these experiences, how it is to be outside, probably you are born later. I know how easy it is to be outside with a big vision. We want to become a member of the EU just a few years after we got independent, and now being the inside. One of the biggest compliments I have gotten once in Ukraine, I was talking to a group of civil society representatives. They told me, for us, you are not just the commissioner for enlargement. For us, you are a commissioner for hope. And this is why it was so emotional. It is not every time that emotional, but having this vision to become a member of the EU in these geopolitical times, it's something probably which is very different than in the years, even if this was after the Second World War, when your country became a member. You joined the EU or the founding countries not to have war again. We had a war on the territory of ex-Yugoslavia, starting in Ljubljana in Slovenia, when 3 hours after the independence, the tanks rolled out. But when the war then stopped, in 1995 in Bosnia and Herzegovina, okay, we had it later on Kosovo, Serbia, we just forgot it. So this war in ex-Yugoslavia, it is very interesting, has not changed Europe at all in the sense of, gosh, it has happened again.
Yeah.
And now it is happening again. And this is, having these experiences from the outside, I can get it much more, perhaps. And it's great that we can talk about this. It's really not just the technical process. For Ukraine, it is about their everything. When I was 2 months back in Madrid, we have celebrated 40 years of their membership. And I was asking a guy who was born later, what is Europe to you? And he was telling me, everything. So I don't know anything else. I don't know, is there a public debate on this or not in Netherlands?
I think
on enlargement, not really, I think.
I mean, on how important is this for your country to be a member of the EU?
No,
we take it for granted.
Yeah, the Dutch take it for granted, and they criticize it a lot. But I think they are also aware of the fact that the Netherlands is so wealthy and rich and prosperous, mainly thanks to the European Union. But it's very hard to find somebody in the Netherlands who will admit that or even think about that in that way. But I think they just take it for granted. They have no clue. I don't know.
Yeah, but Brexit diminished all the Nexits and the Quitalis and all these options that some politicians think of as a good option for their country. So in a way, we became more European, and especially Russia's war in Ukraine and the fact that this MAGA movement is now pretty big in the US. I think it all adds up. As you can see in the polling, that we're more in favor of the EU, but still we're in Schengen, we have the euro, we have roaming, we take it all for granted.
But there is a new element in this enlargement process, and we see a change in Netherlands too. So the Eurobarometer survey released in February this year has shown that 77% of people in Netherlands believe their country was under threat.
Yeah.
And this is one of the highest in Europe. So we have been pretty surprised. And of course, you are also supportive. Last year, when we have done especially Eurobarometer on enlargement, 69% of Dutch people support EU enlargement. Few days after this, I was in Den Haag talking in the Committee for European Affairs and then at our delegation. And they were asking me, are you sure that this is okay? Because we don't believe that it is that high. So the result has been surprisingly. So apparently we are doing something right, that your people support the enlargement.
I think there has always been a disconnect between The Hague and the people in the Netherlands about what it is to be in the European, what it is to be European. And the politicians are far more, I think, wary of being in favor of Europe, whereas the citizens, they really know very well what they have to thank to the European Union. But there's a gap, I think, between Dutch politicians and the citizens.
But it's important that we talk about it. I'm grateful that we can talk in the Make Europe Great Again today, because one of the reasons that people have not been more engaged, or in some countries are not more engaged, is, in my opinion, that we don't communicate well or good from our side. And I caught myself speaking too much about chapters and clusters and not what this brings to the people. And we try to correct this now, because, we can't enlarge against the will of the member states or against the will of the citizens. So our task is really to engage, to explain, that actually it is not that obvious that our Europe will be strong also in the future.
Yeah, but maybe it's interesting now to talk a little bit also about what we call the unexpected new candidates, like Norway and Iceland, because we were talking about emotions and experiencing threats and wars. Iceland and Norway are far, far away from Ukraine, from Russia's invasion over there. Were you surprised by their ambitions to at least have a look at the option to join the EU?
We know for Norway, we do not know yet. But for sure, if the referendum in Iceland will be positive, this could also affect Norway. Their Minister of Foreign Affairs, which I met a few weeks back here in Brussels, was talking about this very, very open. Not surprised. I would say that this war in Ukraine has really changed a lot. And Trump's attitude towards Europe has also changed a lot. I think that the discussion around Greenland has brought new dimension in this area, or Arctic dimension. We know for Iceland that for the time being it is almost impossible for young people to buy the apartment, because the interest rates are around 13%, and they want to have euro. You can't have euro if you are not a part of European Union, unless it is Montenegro. We already have. I have
for years.
Or the Vatican.
I have to admit this. No, but the Iceland is. I think it's interesting if we see how well those countries are already integrated. Especially those two. They are part of the common market. They are part of the Schengen area. But still, Iceland would love something more. Yeah. So euro for sure is their idea. Why? Economic reasons, but also security reasons. Europe has been built not to have war again. And it has never been a war on the territory of the EU, but it has been war in Europe. So this tells a lot. We are ready with my team for Iceland.
Would it be easier for Iceland to join because they already have so many stuff in place that are aligned to the European Union? Would they have get some kind of fast track to membership?
There is no fast track, but indeed they have already closed 11 chapters in the past, and they would not have to apply again. For instance, if UK would want to come back, they would have to apply for the candidate status. Iceland is still having this status, so technically we can go on September the 1st, and my team is ready to do this. Since there are very good integration already, it could go much faster. Because of this, but not because of somehow fast tracking. Of course, we will have to solve the issues which are very important to Iceland. This is fishery. Yeah.
And I think you have to talk to the Western Balkans. It's kind of sensitive that another country, even though it's not called a fast track, but somehow is in better position.
They are not that, when I was talking to Montenegro politicians, how would they see if, then suddenly they will be two front runners? They would be very happy. Why is this possible? The area where the candidates have the biggest problems is with the so-called fundamentals cluster. Rule of law, anti-corruption, judiciary system, freedom of media. And in this respect, I can say that Iceland is probably much more developed than some of the member states, not just some of the candidates or all of the candidates.
Yeah. Let's dive into the deep. We are talking about the Copenhagen criteria, still relevant today, still the guide actually for every new member. Are they really up to the challenges of today? If you look at today's geopolitical realities, are the chapters still, up to date?
Indeed, they are, because they are quite general and they are expressed through the 33 chapters we have in the accession process. So it is about building up the democratic institutions. Mm-hmm. It is about having economy which is capable of surviving in the common market. And of course, it is the capacity of the countries being able to implement the European acquis or our rules. So the whole process is built on this. So Copenhagen criteria are still valid. Interesting, when Denmark was having the council presidency last year, we were talking about Copenhagen after Copenhagen, because they have brought a new push in the enlargement process. So back to your question, indeed, Copenhagen criteria are kind of the very, very good basis of for whatever we do in the accession process. And it is right so. I think that it is not just that the candidate countries are getting the benefits. We have to be sure that once we get new members, they will make us stronger, not weaker. And this is actually somehow enshrined in Copenhagen criteria.
You were already telling us a little bit about language and how you can communicate with EU citizens about the enlargement process, because it's very difficult for people to understand. If we talk about terminology, like Copenhagen criteria, that's also something that not everyone is aware of, that what it actually is. But now in the debate, we're also talking about gradual membership, enhanced membership, associate membership, membership light. How many flavors do we have in the bubble called Brussels?
Here I'm very strict based on a Dutch approach. So there is only one membership, and it is a full membership, meaning you can only become a member of the EU once you fulfill all the criteria. Indeed, we are discussing, and this is will affect the methodology of the enlargement in the future, which is, by the way, roughly the same as it was 40 years back when Spain and Portugal joined. What we see today is that because of the process is merit-based, and we will keep it merit-based, it can take longer time. It really completely depends on how the countries are delivering. But now the main idea is you can only become a full member once you implement all the criteria, as I have said. We are now looking into the possibilities that if you fulfill the criteria on the way, could you become a member for this part already on the way? So this is then gradual integration or enhanced gradual integration. For instance, the Moldova and Ukraine from January this year are part of free roaming. Balkan generally is part of SEPA and now preparing for roaming. We are preparing energy independence of Ukraine and Moldova until the end of 27. And meaning that for these areas, they have to align their legislation with our requirements. Only then they can be part of this gradual integration. Now there is a big discussion. You have seen there are many letters from our European leaders, and they will try, or the discussion is in the sense of, could we have different areas of integration which will enable the candidate countries also to be part in the decision-making process, or only as an observer. But this is now only the debate, so nothing is decided yet. We have already this kind of cooperation with, if I may say so, third countries. We were speaking about Norway or Iceland before, or even Switzerland. They are part of Schengen. So they can be present at the council. In this council formation, they can participate, but they cannot take the decisions. So perhaps we could use this approach also for the candidates.
Now we talk about Ukraine. Zelensky is banging on the door. He wants to talk at least about EU accession. But now we see in the other media that European leaders are saying, oh, maybe let's postpone that talk to October when we have a specific summit. I've spoken to Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Kachka a few weeks ago when he was in the Netherlands, and he told me that, for instance, he would like to postpone difficult discussions on agriculture. And he says 2027 could be possible for signing the accession treaty. He says it's realistic in some accelerated scenarios. He's not talking about ratification, but he says, let's delay Ukraine's full access to, for instance, EU farm subsidies until a later budget cycle. And let's phase in subsidies gradually over 10, 15 years. Can this be an option?
For sure. Once Ukraine will come to the end of all the chapters or negotiations, or somewhere close to this time frame, we will start to prepare the accession treaty, what we are doing now for Montenegro already. And in this accession treaty, we can put down all the elements. How do we see our relations, EU-27, with a candidate country in specific areas? And we have many tools like transitional periods, speaking about agriculture or how fast a country can benefit from our funds. Poland has gotten 20 years transitional period for complete integration of their agriculture. So entering 2004 and only in 2024, the farmers of Poland have completely or equal status as all the other farmers. So we have these tools, and we will see, how we will then negotiate with Ukraine, how far we will go, how we will be able to also to protect our farmers. So it is not that once you implement all the criteria, you get all the rights. It is a negotiation, and it is put down in this framework. But what we see now is, especially with the accession treaty for Montenegro, this will be a new generation of the accession treaty. Not that much because of, transitional periods for agriculture or any other areas like, free movement of workers. There are always limitations, have been for the newcomers. That, for instance, when Slovenia got in 2004, I think we got 10 years when the market was not completely liberalized for the workers. But when I speak about the accession treaty for Montenegro and kind of new generation, Our idea is, it is still in the discussion with the member states, that we have to have special safeguards how to protect our European Union, that once we will get new members, they will stick to the rules also after 5, 10 or 15 years being a member. Of course, I have to admit we are building this on bad examples or experiences we have had in the past with some member states, or especially one member state, which is Hungary.
Yeah, we've seen with Hungary that actually the Treaty of Lisbon is not really, never took into account the fact that once countries become members, that it can actually turn against ourselves.
We didn't imagine.
No, we didn't.
Imagine that this will happen. We have this holy Article 2 of the European Treaty, what are our values. But then it's also very important Article 4, which speaks about the loyal cooperation or sincere cooperation. And Hungary was clearly working against this on the case of Ukraine. We will not be able to negotiate with Ukraine if the country would not have gotten the candidate status. And candidate status was only possible with a unanimity decision of EU27. But later on the way, Hungary said, no, Ukraine cannot become a member of the EU. This is so irresponsible, and it is not in the European spirit. So we have to see how to protect ourselves. When I was last November in one of the interviews for the first time speaking about that we have to protect the EU, that we will not get Trojan horses inside, I was heavily criticized. What do I mean? Because we are so good. But now, this term is being used by many others. And I think it is right. We cannot afford and allow ourselves that we will bring Trojan horses who will ruin us from the inside.
But could there be some kind of correction system, or like every 5 years we are looking to the countries if they still respect the Copenhagen criteria, and if they don't, they may get a timeout, or maybe on the long run being expelled from the European Union? Would it be an idea to actually check all the EU member states if they respect the Copenhagen criteria?
I think that this debate would be good. For the time being, when I speak about this new generation of accession treaty, this will be only for the newcomers. So for the old member states like Netherlands, we have the European Treaty. So I think that the future debate will also have to come to the point when we will discuss this kind of questions, what you have said now. Are really all the member states always working for the benefits or for the good of the whole European Union? Saying this, of course, there are different national interests. This is how Europe is built, but the decision-making process is made so that, like unanimity, I'm not in favor to abolish unanimity, but it would be good that in some cases we would have qualified majority. This is also what the European Commission is saying, especially on the field of foreign policy, where one country can block the rest of 26, what was happening now. But we have to see, the European Union, as at the beginning or until the 5 years back, was built on the premises that once we have new members, they all work together for the good of the Europe. We can't trust that this will be always like this.
And the alternative would be to install 27 bathrooms outside the council. So every time a member is not happy, just go to the bathroom. Let's talk about Poland shortly. The economy of Poland is doing great. It was worth 76 billion euros in 1989.
67 even.
67. In 1989, when the wall fell, it became an EU member in 24, and it's now approaching 1 trillion euros. It's the 6th economy in the EU. It's a success story from an economical perspective. However, it's still a net beneficiary. So it takes at least 3 decades before countries actually contribute to the EU. Isn't this too long, or is this the period that we have to take into account from accession to a success? 30
This
years?
is a very good question, because when we will get new member states or when we have done the survey, one of the concerns of our citizens is how much enlargement will cost or how this will affect our budget. But speaking about Poland and the money it gets, indeed, the Polish economy is one of the best examples what enlargement process means. If I go back to 91, in 91, GDP per capita in Ukraine has been higher than in Poland. Today it is 5 times higher.
Yeah.
But it is still at the 80 to 85% of the average of the EU. So GDP per capita in purchasing power is how we measure the prosperity. So,
But it's now close to France. The French and the Polish are on the same level.
But not the total amount of the economy on the large scale is a decisive point for getting the funds from Europe. It is important, GDP per capita, one criteria, and then also the regional development. What we do with the mostly cohesion money is helping the country to get developed in all the areas equally. And sometimes, talking also from the point of Slovenia, we have had one area close to Hungarian border less developed. The others were better. They didn't get the money this area have. So for Poland, it could still take some years that there will be a net beneficiary. But through this higher and higher economic development, they are also contributing more. So the more you are developed, the more you contribute, but you still get a net contribution from the EU because of the reason I was telling before. So it doesn't matter so much how many years or decades you have had, 3 decades, but how actually generally the prosperity is distributed in the country. And just to compare, when Poland has entered in 2004, they have reached 50% of the GDP level of Europe, now 80 to 85. Isn't this a success?
But aren't you afraid that when Poland will reach the point that they won't be a net beneficiary anymore, that there will be political obstruction from Warsaw? Because, like you said, people look at the budget and they feel like the EU is working for them. On the other hand, if you have to pay, then it's always a sensitive topic. So are we reaching the point that, for instance, in a country like Poland, there will be a huge debate about this?
I don't know what will happen at this point, but generally, one of the values we are built on is solidarity. For instance, now Netherlands is a big contributor because you are economically really very developed, and you are helping the other countries or regions to develop. Once Poland will reach this level, they will have to contribute for the others. I'm not denying this could be the issue, but this is how we function, and we will have to explain a lot and again, why this Poland will have to or will become a net contributor.
One more question before I forget about something you said at the beginning of the interview about when we asked you about when your term could be successful, if you have a goal, how many members could join the EU, and you were saying possibly 2 or 3. Of course, we all know that Montenegro and Albania are in a good position, to put it that way. And the third one in that case is Iceland, referring, how to put it in English, we have to wait and see what happens during the referendum. But that's the third one, I guess, right?
Yes, but I could also potentially say 4, because Moldova is really doing a great progress. And it is a small country with a specific history, but very, very eager to become a member of the EU. And I love to tell that they are the best students in my class because they really deliver. And there is no excuse of not to deliver. They have sometimes difficulties because they are lacking capacities, but generally they could also surprise us. Their goal is or vision that they will finish the technical negotiations at the end of 28. And if they will go on like they are doing today, this would be possible.
But how can you work around the situation in Transnistria? Because we experienced the case of Cyprus. Cyprus joined the EU. Very difficult situation because part of the country is occupied by Turkey. So people over there, they can actually vote for the European elections, but that's the only thing they can do. Do you think that the part of Transnistria, so the occupied territory of Moldova, that will be excluded then from EU territory? How are you going to deal with this?
For us, we see Moldova as a sovereign, whole Moldova, including Transnistria as a sovereign country. We respect territorial integrity. But this is a good question because I think that convergence is already happening, mostly on the economic part. For instance, 10 years back, 100% of the exports from Transnistria went to Russia. Today, 70% is going to European Union. 75,000 people from Transnistria are having healthcare system from the rest of Moldova because it is much better. Daily, many people are going to work in Moldova or in Romania. So this kind of a natural convergence is happening, but the government in Chisinau is very much engaged to solve this problem. As you know, Putin is observing very carefully what is happening there. 2 months back, he enabled the citizens of Transnistria easier to get the Russian passports. But when I was there 12 days back, people were telling me, who wants the Russian passports? We want to have a European one. So this is happening on the way, but indeed political solution will have to be found then.
Yeah. Let's talk briefly about Serbia, another interesting country, as a euphemism. It's the largest candidate country by far in the Western Balkans. And people say Vučić has to pick, to make choices in this geopolitical world, which side he wants to be on, either the East or the West. And to take the Netherlands as an example, it has repeatedly pushed hard conditions on Serbia's EU membership, partly linked, of course, to the legacy of the Srebrenica trauma. However, pushing too hard, is there also the risk of pushing the country away?
It's a very interesting country, and here, I can easily explain why the accession process is difficult, because it is connected with the rule of law. Even if Serbia is having a strong economy, 6.6 million people, it will not be able to become a member just because of a very good or strong economy. And this is what I like. And this is where I'm also happy that Netherlands is supporting my work in the sense of being strict, that if you are deriving or you're backsliding on the rule of law, you can't go on in the accession process. And this is what actually happened with the last report, when it was a clear backsliding for the first time, actually in the country. So many things are important, but the rule of law, meaning the country will have to align with the European legislation on the way, not just at the end. And the topic you have mentioned, the CFSP alignment, so alignment with the European foreign and security policy. So we agreed at the EU West Balkan Summit in Tivat in Montenegro, Vučić accepted some obligations they have to do on the field of judiciary because of the amendments from February, on the field of the electoral legislation based on the ODE recommendation, media pluralism, and CFSP alignment up to 70%. So if they will implement or fulfill this, then we could do a further step. Otherwise, it will not be possible. As you know, for the time being, we have withheld the payments from the growth plan because they don't fulfill the criteria anymore. And this has not happened before.
Yeah. Now, let's zoom out a little bit. We started this interview by asking, when will your commission or the commissioner for enlargement be obsolete? Let's do a little bit of philosophy. Where does the EU or Europe actually start and end? Is it a geographical thing? Is it a union of ideas and values? Is it economical? Could one day maybe Canada join the EU or Japan? Or where does Europe end? Or does it end?
I love this question a lot. For me, in this geopolitical situation today, Europe is much more than just geography. And once I have, just the anecdote, got an email from citizens from Canada. Madam Commissioner, under which conditions Canada could become a member of the EU? Usually I don't answer this email by myself, but I did. And I said, there are two preconditions. You have to be a state, this you fulfilled, and you have to be European state. So, we need some new partnerships, so on. And then I got the answer back, come on, don't see it that narrow, was his answer. So, not every country would want to become a member of the EU or will fulfill the criteria. But I think that what we should strive for is having special partnerships, like Canada. We are so much aligned. Every speech Mr. Carney is having, it is about special connections we Europe and Canada have. So I think that in the future, perhaps, we will not be based only on the geography, but as you have said, on the values or on the common idea doing good for us and the world.
You say to join the European Union, you have to be a European country, but there is never any definition of what it is European. There's no legal definition, there's no philosophical definition. So what is a European country?
I agree with you. There is no legal definition. I don't know. For the time being, it is as it is. But for the future, I would imagine that, we will go out of the box thinking and saying that we also can have partners or members who are geographically not here. But really, I'm speaking about something I would like to see.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter.
To make it a bit clear to the listeners, if you look at NATO, you have members of NATO, and you have a few countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia who have this special relationship with NATO. Is that something that we are talking now, what you're talking about? You have the EU and you have some special relationships like, for instance, Canada could be.
Probably yes, but now we already have many security and defense agreements, also with Norway. And then, as you have mentioned, Japan, Australia. So we have had never before that many important FTAs, free trade agreements, which is also important part. So this speaks about the attractiveness. That's why I like this question. So why would we need or why there is, talking about Canada joining the EU? I like this spirit in the sense of Europe is something good. So let's build on this.
Yeah. Before we finish up with a few questions on reforming the EU itself, because that's also something that we find fascinating. One more question: is Russia still welcome in the future, if they want to apply?
If they will fulfill the criteria. But, the member states would decide if we will give Russia candidate status for the time being. I can't imagine. But, I was listening I was ambassador in Germany, and I was listening Putin's speech in German parliament in 2001. He was speaking about Russia being really important part of the free Europe. How much has changed? This was 2001 or even some years later. So now this country wants to destroy the other country based on what? For me, what we have these systems now is, that's why I don't believe that Russia will be able to become in the near future a member of the EU. Putin could tolerate the leaders in Ukraine as long as he was able to control them. When Ukraine has decided to sign the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, this is where actually the conflict started in 2014. So there are two completely different concepts. Putin doesn't want its neighbors or countries to be economically strong and democracies, because if they are like this, they cannot control them. What we do in the process of accession is developing economy, making democracy stronger so that we could be equal partners. This is, has struck me so many times when I speak about Russia. The whole idea or ideology is completely different, and for centuries old what Putin is doing now. That's why I'm so proud of our Europe, following this idea of being equal partner.
How do we grow as an EU without becoming weaker? That's something that we're discussing a lot when we talk about what the EU itself should do to become better. Reforms we need, transformations. What are your thoughts about this?
Indeed, this is a very important topic. It would make no sense that we will get weaker. That's why, the accession process takes time. And it's merit-based, or Copenhagen criteria again, because you have to be strong to be a part of European Union. Indeed, we will have to see. We have never had 30 countries. We could function with 28, and I'm sure we will be able to function with Montenegro. Montenegro has the number of its people is like Antwerp.
Yeah.
I don't know which
Stuttgart.
Yes, I don't know which Netherlands city has
Utrecht.
The Hague is 600,000, I think.
So they will not endanger us, but we have to see. If we take in all the present candidate countries, it is 40 million Ukraine and the rest 20 million. So it would be roughly 60 million. It is still by far less than the Big Bang in 2004 and later, but still. So we will have to see, the number in square kilometers or in the number of people is not that important. Effectiveness, it is. Meaning what kind of decision-making processes, what kind of policies, what kind of governance, and of course financing and values. And these are the areas which are now going through in the so-called pre-accession process, where we see where we would have to adapt inside. And one of the areas is decision-making process, as I was saying before, how to go to QMV, and of course financing. So the financial package for Montenegro will show how do we think about the future integration of the newcomers. So we are working on this. Perhaps if we meet again in 1 year, I will be able to tell you more.
But you have thoughts about this. I know you have.
Skeptical or
no? I think this is my personal opinion. I think the enlargement of the European Union is inevitable and necessary, but we have to work very hard to integrate far more than we are now. So there are many. I think the problem still in the European Union, and it's probably blasphemy to say in this building, but it is the member states are the problem, because every time there is something that is not working well, usually you can trace it back to the national capital. So as long as the national states are not really convinced of more European integration, you can work very hard, and all the other commissioners in this building. But they are, I think, the biggest obstacle to their own future. But that's more philosophical, I think.
But here I agree with you. No, we can't do anything against the will of the member states, and member states have different interests. But until now, we made it. In the past, if you see, we have had many problems in the European Union. Sometimes we didn't know how to handle, like migration crisis in 2015. Today we have a system. I hope it will work well to protect us. So in my opinion, we can't have always all the answers to the different crises we are confronted with, but we are able to find the solutions. And I hope that this optimism from the past will also follow us in the future.
Yeah. Can we conclude that in these gloomy times where the Europeans are really suffering from a lot of self-doubt and doubt about the future, that the Commission, at least you are, Marta Kos, as a commissioner, very optimistic about Europe's future?
Yes, I am. I don't see any other place in the world where you can live and work that freely, without restrictions, being, human rights being respected. So perhaps we'll be the only island in the world where what is so precious to us will be respected. Also, the freedom of research. Yeah, I wouldn't have imagined that we will have to talk that in some countries, in one big country in the world, you can't do research on climate change or LGBTIQ. So that's why, but this optimism, we would have to have a commissioner for European optimism, to share or to spread the good ideas about Europe.
Can I apply?
Oh, I would love to change the portfolio and having this. Yes, I would love to, work with the people who, consciously telling good things about the Europe. We have this tendency that we are criticizing bureaucracy. Yes, of course it is a bureaucracy, different decision-making principle. Of course it is difficult. But what is Europe today? We have asked young generation. They are most pro enlargement and pro benefits oriented in the sense of what Europe is bringing us. I don't want to live in the country or in the community where I can't speak freely, where I will be excluded because I am a foreigner, where I can't use my own language even here in Brussels, Slovenian language being so. I think we should speak up about how what is also good in Europe, not only about bad in Europe. If I paraphrase, I think it was Kennedy once said, there is nothing bad in Europe that we couldn't do better with what is good in Europe. But let's speak also about what is good, not just what is bad.
Thank you for your time and for this interview, Madam Commissioner Marta Kos. And I leave Stefan here with you as the new Commissioner for European Optimism.
But thank you so much. It was a pleasure. But make Europe great again. This is the idea you are having in your title. Yeah. So why do you have this in your title?
Yeah, because we think that that's one of the goals, of course. And it's also a little bit ironic, but it is, I think one of the topics we talk most about in our show is, we call it the Calimero effect. I don't know if you had Calimero in Slovenia.
Of course, the poor guy.
Yeah, the little one.
Yeah.
I'm small and the rest is big. And we should get rid of Calimero in Europe, the attitude at least. That's what we try to...
In the shadow here at our artwork, you see at the left, you see Trump, at the right, Putin and Xi. And we're the balloon. We're a bit empty, but we should enlarge the balloon again. That's
I like
the idea.
This a lot. So I can use your title in my speeches in the future if you allow, because this should be our goal, making Europe great again.
Yeah, and
you have the blessing of the new Commissioner for Optimism.
And I think of the new Prime Minister of Hungary, because someone took the title, right? Because, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Marta
Pleasure.
Kos. Thank you.